famously Buffett and Munger, Charlie Munger called Bitcoin rat poison, and then Buffett called it rat poison squared. And so you get really intelligent people who are well respected for what they've done talking about Bitcoin. So first, what's your reaction to the Buffett opinion on Bitcoin?
I think everybody's captured by their frame of reference. Warren Buffett, would you agree that Warren Buffett, for the most part, made money investing in stocks?
Yeah, in non-technology stocks primarily.
And maybe overseeing operating companies. How successful would he have been if he did that in Nigeria, or let's say Zimbabwe or Argentina for the past 15 years, or Venezuela?
Not very well.
That strategy wouldn't have worked, right? For example, there is no strategy that would work if you were a business person in Zimbabwe when the currency collapsed. And if you look at the Argentine blue dollar, the Argentine peso actually used to be worth $1, and then it was 3 pesos to the dollar. Today it's on the black market. They call it the blue market. It's worth about 150 pesos to the dollar. If you live in a world where let's just start by assuming the currency is strong and we have no problem with that, and that stocks are going to work, and then let's talk about our investment strategy. Well, if you live in that world and you can make those assumptions, great. But what if the currency weakens at 15% a year for the next decade? Then your strategy doesn't work. So I think that for the most part, the world's full of successful people, but there's 2 things they're missing. One, they're assuming optimistically that in the United States and Western Europe, whatever currency challenges we have, whatever weakness of the currency we have, will be rapidly rectified. They're either in denial, here's how you'll know. Ask someone that's an investor how they did last year. If they're honest, they'll say, oh, all my, the dollar crashed and all my stocks are up 20 to 50% because the dollar's weaker. And if they tell you, oh, I had a great year, all my portfolio is up 37% or 50% because I'm a genius stock picker, right? That's how you interpret the world. Is the dollar weakening or is the market getting better, right? And so there's a lot of people that have been successful in their frame of reference, and so they just attribute the virtuous activity of, their virtuous stock picking or their virtuous business strategy for their success, right? And then they wonder why everybody else can't be like them, right? And then I think the second part of this is Bitcoin is a paradigm shift. It's the first time in the history of the human race that we managed to put first layer money on a digital network. There is nothing to study. Someone is telling you they've studied this. How could you have studied it? It's like we invented fire or we invented electricity. It's such a new invention that if your friend said, I spent 47 hours studying Bitcoin, right? And I have the following, detailed concerns about how it's going to evolve as a dominant digital asset network. And these are the things I'm worried about. Maybe it would be a constructive conversation. But I think that most people don't even understand yet that it's a digital monetary network. They don't even know there's a class of such a thing. It's the first such thing in the history of the human race. So I've created the ability to manifest property in cyberspace using strong encryption, and I have decentralized that network such that no company or no CEO or no country can be a point of failure. Right? This is a first in the human race. This is a fire in cyberspace that's burning with $1 trillion of energy. It's the fastest growth to $1 trillion of any digital network in the history of the world, 12 years. And so if you embrace that and you say, okay, I've got 2 things going on here. This is the first time in 30 years that the money supply the broad money supply in the U.S. and Europe is all linked and all collapsing at a rate north of 20%. We didn't have this. Not in your lifetime, not in my lifetime. The last time we got something similar to this was 1980, and before in the 70s. But in the 70s, you had a bunch of different central banks: the German bank, the French bank, the U.S. bank. The U.S. was not the world current. It was like 30% of the currency trades in the 1980s. It wasn't 90%. So we had the formation of the EU. The EU tied all of European currency to the dollar. That became 90% of all the currency. Every other central bank tied in the dollar. So we arrive in a period in the last 12 months where the behavior of the U.S. Fed and the expansion of the M2 money supply is in essence weakening every currency on earth at the same time. You've only got three sets of currencies. You've got the strong currencies weakening at the same rate as the dollar. And that's like 20 rich countries. Then you've got most currencies weakening 20 to 40% more against the dollar. And then you've got the last basket of currencies weakening 80% or more against the dollar. They're utterly collapsing. And so you have a macroeconomic circumstance we've never seen in our lifetime. And then you have a technology, the most disruptive technology of our life. More disruptive than Google, than Facebook, more disruptive than YouTube, more disruptive than Zoom, more disruptive than the iPhone. It took Google 22 years to get to $1 trillion. It took Amazon 24 years to get to $1 trillion. It took Apple 42 years to get to $1 trillion. It took Microsoft 44 years to get to $1 trillion. It took Bitcoin 12. It's a monetary fire. It's burning in cyberspace. And these two things together, by the way, how do you feed a monetary fire? With money.
How?
We're more money than ever. The money is feeding the fire, right? And anybody living in a comfortable environment with a business strategy that worked last year, right? They're going to be late to understand this because they haven't had this jarring realization that there's something fundamentally different. By the way, if you lived in Argentina or you lived in Lebanon and your currency, like let's take Lebanon, it collapses overnight by 80%. And if someone handed you an iPhone and said, you can put Bitcoin on this and you won't be broke and starving tomorrow, you would have an incentive to learn about this new technology because your entire world crashed around your head. But if you're living in a world where you think you just made 30% return on your portfolio, you don't quite have the same appreciation of the problem.